everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I am your host for today, Taylor Rockwell. Joining me on the other end of the line is a man I've already started to annoy before we've even begun recording. It's Ryan Bailey. Hello, Ryan.
Greetings, Tay. Thank you so much for having me on Total Soccer Show. Easy for me to say. Having me on this podcast once again. Delighted to be here. Had a nice international break, been very restful. Been a bit like Aymeric Laporte. Haven't done much physical activity over the past few weeks. I'm not quite as lonely as him, though. Can you imagine being Aymeric Laporte in an international break at City's Etihad campus?
I mean,
who's he going to talk to?
My fear for him is that a lot of times they promote like young players and academy players to do first team training when all the other first teamers are gone. So I do have this image of him just surrounded by 15-year-olds, just looking very, very, very sad.
It's just him and Pep like shouting things with a marker pen in his hand, writing on whiteboards and going, "Come on, guys! Come on, guys!"
You know what? Like you say that in jest. That's absolutely what I feel like happens. It's just Aymeric Laporte like around in an empty room as Pep Guardiola just screams at him repeatedly for like 8 straight hours about how he has to have more passion and intensity.
It's too much intensity for one person to take. If it's spread out in a sort of room of a whole squad, that's okay. But wow, poor Aymeric.
I do wonder if there are managers like that who have to have a number of players to be able to kind of vent that intensity, because if it's a one-on-one scenario, it might be too much. I feel like Ferguson might have been one of those people, and maybe Pep is one as well. Maybe so.
Jurgen Klopp probably in that wheelhouse too.
Yeah, that's a safe one. So we are here today to talk about the international break. We're going to do a review of some of the news, some of the events, some of the major incidents. I will not refer to you as a Scotland fan as I did before we started recording.
Yeah, please don't do that. Before we go any further, by the way, what is your feeling on international breaks? How do you feel about them in general?
I think I am more excited about them now than I used to be in the past, because I think I'm more excited about the U.S. national team than I've been in the last year or so. I think that factors into it too. But if we weren't doing the show, if we didn't do Total Soccer Show, not this episode specifically, I probably would be less excited about them, because this gives me kind of an avenue to talk about them and to talk about what's going on and who did what. But if it were just me watching a bunch of different games, I don't know if it would be that exciting, especially because we're so early in Euro qualifying, and then the rest of it is just kind of friendlies that don't necessarily matter. And so it would make me feel a little bit like, okay, that's great, and I got to see some people, but maybe let's get back to the Premier League and La Liga and Bundesliga and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I feel the same way pretty much.
Really?
I like them more at the moment because my national team happens to be a bit better than they have been for most of my adult life.
But do you find yourself watching other teams as well, or is it usually just like you see what England are doing and then you kind of move on to the next England game and then you wait for the Premier League to return?
I kind of like it in a way because I sort of fire up Soccerway in the morning and look at, this is all the clashes that are happening all different times a day. Think I'll check that one out. I quite like it because you never know what you're going to get the next day, I find, because there's so many different various friendlies and qualifiers going on.
There's that, I'm going to butcher it, but there's that joke about like, I wish I had the motivation to keep the plans that I made like a week before, something like that. Basically, it's like you make these plans in your head, and then when it comes time to execute those plans, you're sort of like, why did I do this to myself? That's what I do. I do the exact same thing as you. I look at Soccerway and I'm like, there's this game. Turkey is playing the Netherlands. I definitely want to watch this. Iceland are always fun to watch, and I make this whole list. And I probably end up watching a half of one game, maybe one game, and then I go back and watch highlights and replays and stuff if need be. So I think I like to think I'm more excited about it, but then I end up maybe watching the games that I would usually end up watching anyway.
But we've established that we both love Soccerway and they're not a sponsor, so there you go.
It feels like they should be. So let's just move on to other topics. I don't want to bore you too much because I know you don't love the U.S. national team the way I do.
Hey, don't be saying that. Don't be saying that.
I'm sandbagging you up front. No, I know that you bleed red, white, and blue now. The blue is kind of an issue. But
I was saying before we went on air that there are lots of fans out there, and I totally respect their position, where they like several teams. They might like PSG, and they might like Real Madrid, and they might like an MLS team as well. I'm the kind of person who only likes one team, the team that I started with when I was a little lad. And I feel the same way about the international break, in that I very much am interested in England's affairs, and I follow the US. I've lived in this country for 8 years, and I'm very interested in it. But it's not where my heart lay. That's all I was saying.
I think that makes total sense.
Back off, Tay-Tay.
I think that totally makes sense. But it also, it feels like, so it's worth noting, Ryan and I have never met in person. We've just talked a lot over the phone and back in the Goalmouth days.
And it's weird because we live next door to each other as well.
It is. We just refuse to come out of our respective castles. We both live in castles, by the way. But that's kind of in keeping with what I would expect, which is that I imagine that you're a person who would, like, if there's tickets to a US game, or there's tickets to a Mexico game or whatever in the area, you might go and you might enjoy it, but you're not going to get like sucked into this, like, oh, they're my team now, I love them, I'm going to watch them forever. It's just sort of like, I feel like you're up for the spectacle or up for the occasion of the moment.
Exactly. It's all part of life's rich tapestry, Tay.
There we are. Well said. Better than I could say it, certainly, which is not surprising because you're quite eloquent. And the accent always helps.
Apart from when I try to say the name of the show at the start of the show, but hey.
Well, there is that. I forgot about that. So I wanted to get to the Concacaf Nations League. That draw has taken place. We've got our 4 groups for like the top level. The big one that our listeners will probably be focused on is the USA in Group A, alongside Canada and Cuba. Cuba, the beloved nation of Alexis Guerreros of the Cooligans. I know he's been tweeting lots of stuff about this one. I think they want to call it the El Embargo Clasico, is what
nice.
I think I've heard. I may be misremembering that tweet. Then you've got Group B, Mexico, Panama, Bermuda. Group C, Honduras, Trinidad and Tobago, Martinique. And Group D, Costa Rica, Haiti, and Curacao. I don't know which of those is the toughest group. I'm inclined to say maybe it's Mexico, Panama, Bermuda, just because Mexico and Panama both went to the World Cup. Ryan, if you were kind of competing as one of those teams, I'll let you pick one of the top teams from either one of those groups. Which one do you think would be the most happy with this draw?
I think the US, right? Because I think if you were Mexico and you've got Panama in your group. If you were Honduras, you've got Trinidad and Tobago, who are no walkover exactly. Costa Rica, I think they've got a reasonably easy group with Haiti and Curacao as well. I'd say the US. I'd be pretty happy with that draw. Were I a Star and Stripes wearing US fan, as you've very much established? I am not. But I do. I think it's an interesting group. There was one comment on the Total Soccer Show Twitter, a reply when you were talking about it, that said this group is capitalism, socialism and communism meeting in one little group. I like that comment. Apologies, I don't have the name of the person who said it, but
that is outstanding, though.
It's pretty good, isn't it? And
that's great.
I mean, you got to feel pretty good about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have fond memories of going to RFK to watch the United States destroy Cuba. I have not quite as fond memories of when the United States went to Cuba. That seemed like a miserable experience for everyone involved.
This was 2016, right?
Exactly, yeah.
On the plowed field.
On the plowed field that, like, I think Christian Pulisic was just looking around like, is this what happens when I come back to play for the national team? I go to like stadiums like this, or I guess maybe more so, what would that be, like stands like this? I can't remember if it was like a full-on stadium. So I am excited for that group, and Canada as well, because there's young up-and-coming talent coming through for Canada that I think it will be like an exciting Canadian team to play against, but maybe to your point, not necessarily like the toughest of opposition, where the U.S. could have gotten, say, Trinidad, which would have been nice, but also then it would have brought those memories back. So it could have been good to sort of avenge 2017, but also maybe it would have gone south again. So I take your point that USA should probably be pretty happy, but I did want to pick your brain on this. So Daryl loves Nations Leagues. I think he was a big fan of the UEFA Nations League. He was very excited when CONCACAF announced that they were going to be doing one as well. I think he thinks of it as official competitions. It's competitions that he argues matter, and so because they matter, people take it a little bit more seriously. They're also official, which means players can be cap-tied. That said, I forget who he was telling me about yesterday. I think it was an English player who said like he was really happy he was excited to take part in an official competition this summer, forgetting that he had already played in the UEFA Nations League, which is technically an official competition. So I'm wondering.
Not this summer though.
Well, yeah, there we go. Good point. That's the key addendum. But I'm wondering, how do you feel about them? Have you enjoyed the UEFA Nations League?
I've got to say, I'm a Nations League believer.
Really?
When it first started out, when the idea was first floated, I thought, this is awful. This is just a money spinner. What the UEFA one I'm talking about. This is a money spinner. This is, they're going to take away some more interesting friendlies against different continental opposition from different continents, I should say. Why are we doing this? It's really confusing. I don't understand how it relates to Euro 2020 qualification. But now we've had it. Now we've had that first round of games. I really quite like it, because I think I agree with Daryl here in that a competitive game is always going to be better than an uncompetitive game. And I think the question you've got to ask when it comes to the CONCACAF version of this is it better for, say, the US to play Brazil in a two-thirds empty MetLife Stadium in a meaningless game, or to have a game where something's on the line in a smaller stadium against the likes of Canada or Cuba? What's better for the development of the team? I'm not convinced it's the Brazil route, certainly.
I think I would agree with that. I think in listening to you and in thinking about what Daryl has said previously, I think why I have a little bit more trepidation is because I guess I can speak for Daryl here because he's not here. So I feel like, he can't defend himself. I think he has this idea that because it's an official competition, therefore the players are going to care more. It's a competitive match with like results that matter, so the players are going to be more up for it than they would be in a friendly. And I guess I don't know if I agree with that because it is this new competition, and it's a group that, as we talked about, like the USA should feel pretty confident to get out of that, and then you go to the next round where like the group winners play each other, and then you have a final game. That's all very exciting, but I think I have a hard time believing that Christian Pulisic, for example, is sort of focused on the UEFA Nations League as like, this is a thing that I want to win, even though it's never existed before, but I'm super up for it. I don't know in my heart if he really is more motivated for a CONCACAF Nations League as opposed to that friendly against Brazil. I think he probably is, but it's just that's the thing that I have a hard time wrapping my head around. He's
a gosh darn professional, so he's going to be focused on whatever game's put in front of him, Taylor.
This is very true.
I think they are different beasts, the CONCACAF and UEFA versions, in that, say, in UEFA, you get a group with, say, Germany and the Netherlands together, and you've got some titans in there, whereas there's no sort of titan clashes in this CONCACAF version. And, I mean, also, what's the prize here? Because we already have the Gold Cup to establish, like, the champion of CONCACAF, right? So... Yep. We're going to have a finals it's going to be this international break next year, March 2020, when the finals of this qualification thing happens. What happened? Maybe I haven't looked this up, but what happens? What do you win? Do you get a trophy? What happens?
I think you're the head nation. That's how it works. You are the lead nation. It's a very fair question, and there may well be one, and I'm just not aware. But I don't know of one. I know with the Euros, with UEFA Nations League, it can kind of it's a backdoor to qualifying for the Euros if things go south. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, and there's the badge of honor of being the Nations League winner. Actually, so I suppose what you'd get out of this is just a badge of honor, really, isn't it? But I mean, it's a new competition, as was the UEFA version. So it's how much importance you place on that being a new competition. But I do have a theory. Listen to my theory, if you will.
Okay.
That Nations League, that Asia are planning a Nations League as well. I think we could be at a stage where all 5 federations have a Nations League and they kind of usurp the competitions like the Euros, like the Gold Cups and whatnot, and the Copa Americas. And we get to a stage where they get so big that they replace the World Cup. Each Nation League feeds into a global Nations League with like a few teams in it, and it's kind of like the World Cup instead of World Cup, bypassing the whole FIFA dealie. What do you think?
Can Gianni Infantino make like a billion trillion dollars off of it? Because if so, then I think he'll be down, and that's really all that matters. As long as you can financially benefit from it, then FIFA will be down.
Well, actually, FIFA are down, and they've actually... there's a news article I found from last year. They've already taken $25 billion from investors for a global Nations League, which basically is what I just described there. Lots of other Nations Leagues feeding into a global one. And they project that the top 5 sides in that would make between $37.5 million and $50 million. By contrast, Germany made $4 million from winning the last Confederations Cup. So there's money to be had here. I think whether it replaces the World Cup, maybe I'm being a bit crazy there, but it could certainly marginalise things like the European Championships, Copa America, and the Gold Cup, couldn't it?
It absolutely could. And really what you've done is given me like a sad vision of the future, because we should note first off that I think when you look at this from if you're a fan of Mexico, United States, Costa Rica, Honduras, like those pot 1 teams from League A, you might see it as like, okay, so they're going to end up playing each other. There's not that much of a motivation. But for everybody else in CONCACAF who maybe with the Hex and stuff like that, you can be done with World Cup qualifying 2 years before the tournament even starts, or 3 years before the tournament even starts. I think it's an idea of giving smaller teams more opportunities to compete in competitive fixtures. The issue I then see is, say they do go the route that you're talking about, and it becomes, if you win your respective Nations League or you're in the top 4 or 5 or whatever, then you get to move to this World Nations League. I have a feeling that if that works, then the next step is the NIT to March Madness of like, now if you're the second tier of these teams, then we're gonna have a second tier Nations League competition and a third tier, because again, any way you can keep more teams playing, it means that there's more people attending those games. It means there's more money rolling into the coffers, which again at FIFA I assume is the Scrooge McDuck bank vault where they just go swimming in their money.
Absolutely. I think I saw someone the other day saying, where was the bank vault? Is it in America or Scotland? Who knows? Anyway, the point about making money and FIFA making money, what interests me is what the US Soccer Federation thinks about this competition, because they're foregoing potentially charging people $100 to watch them play Argentina in an NFL stadium for games against Cuba. So I wonder if they feel like their coffers are going to be slightly lighter due to this competition.
I mean, my honest response to that is I don't care because
I don't care either. But we know what drives these things, right?
Yeah, this is very true. But yeah, it feels like they've made plenty of money off of those exact types of games that you're mentioning. And when you overcharge for them, it really takes away some of that, like the excitement of that moment of that game. And so I guess my hope would be that people, or U.S. Soccer will believe that people will be more willing to attend a competitive fixture, even if it's against a smaller opponent. But also worth noting that people like winning, and I think if you're playing in a competitive environment against Canada and you beat Canada, I think you might be able to sell more tickets to that than you would a friendly in a giant stadium against an Argentina team that isn't bringing their top talent.
Definitely. And one other thing I'll say about this competition format too is a lot of the complaints about it are that it could harm the US. US would be playing against lesser competition. They might not be as enthused to play against the likes of the teams they're going to play against. But we have to remember, and this is a point you made a minute ago, that this kind of competition is designed to help the smaller teams. Mm-hmm. And Concacaf is not set up just to help the US advance in its World Cup hopes. Concacaf is for 41 nations.
Yep.
So, or 41 soccer federations. So, soccer associations, I should say. If I get the phrasing right. But, basically, a lot of the complaints are US centric, I'd say, and you've got to remember that this will help other teams in the region.
I mean, it will, and you mentioned 41. Number 40 is the British Virgin Islands. I feel like that's what you care the most about, is maybe developing more talent so that maybe England can come along and snatch a few more talented players.
Oh, definitely.
From that area. All right, cool.
If we're going to go down into the 40s, by the way, my favorite is Guatemala, country 41. They were suspended from qualifying for the CONCACAF Nations League for lots of impropriety and corruption. Right. But they were just allowed straight into the main thing. They couldn't qualify for it, but they've just been allowed into the competition. They're at the bottom. But hey, they're in.
They're in, and they're in pot 1 from League C. So yeah, I think they'll be pretty happy and pretty confident.
What's the moral of that story? I do not know.
If you cheat and break the rules, there won't be that big of ramifications, but you will be allowed to destroy smaller opposition, I guess is pretty much the takeaway. Speaking of that, let's stay in the region, but let's move south of the United States. Let's talk Mexico for a moment. They handed Chile a 3-1 win, or 3-1 loss rather, then Paraguay a 4-2 loss. So 2 wins to start off Tata Martino's tenure as Mexico manager. But the big talking point, strangely, with all the goals and the exciting soccer played by Mexico, was the Miguel Almiron red card. Subs on in the 56th minute, gets a straight red in the 63rd. I thought this was pretty heinous, and I went back and tried to figure out, was there an incident? Was he frustrated? Had he been hit? And so find out that he had subbed on in the 56th was kind of mind-blowing to me. So I felt like this was a really, really curious incident. I'm wondering where you were on the red card.
I think this is curious, and I think I've watched it several times on replay, and the more times I watch it, when you first see it, you have to sort of laugh a little bit. Wow, he's got in on the back of his knee. That is a high challenge. He's lucky he didn't cause a pretty bad injury. But then, as I look at it more and more, did he try and kind of pull out when he realised he was nowhere near the ball? Do you think so?
I think the thing that kind of continues to throw me is afterwards in the the melee, such as it was, that Almiron is kind of smiling here. And I don't think, though, it was kind of spun as like, oh my gosh, he's even laughing at what he's done. And I do kind of think, I have no loyalties toward Miguel Almiron. I'm not an Atlanta United fan. I'm not a Newcastle fan. But it did feel to me in the moment like he was just sort of like, this is happening, and I don't really know what to make of it. So I guess I'm just going to smile because I'm uncomfortable. And it didn't speak to me that it was a like, I am very angry and I do not like. I don't think he has personal beef with Jose Juan Vasquez.
No.
So I think maybe you're right that it wasn't necessarily as intentional, but it still ended up looking bad and probably deserved the red, in my opinion.
Yeah, I didn't see any malice in it. I don't think he's a particularly malice-filled player, and maybe he's just, excited under the bright lights. First time in Santa Clara, maybe.
I'm
Too
sure
excited.
that's what it was.
Maybe that was it. But I don't know if you noticed, a few minutes later, Nestor Arroyo, the number 2, he put in a dirty slide as well. He's basically a challenge where his butt hit the ground before his foot did. It was like he kind of sort of, I'm going to lay down and just kick out kind of thing. And then he got stretchered off afterwards, which I thought was great. But it was a dirty challenge as well. But yeah, obviously the Almiron one taking the headlines. And you can't argue it wasn't a red card. But I will argue that maybe in the split second as it was happening, he thought, shouldn't be putting my foot there.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair takeaway. Yeah, but I would also say that like the other takeaway I had from this, as you said with Araujo, and then in the Chile game as well, Mexico are a strange like animal in that they are very capable of playing this very pretty attacking possession like technical soccer. But then if you wanted to get into a scrap, they will get into a scrap. Like
yeah.
And I saw that a few times, especially in the Chile game, where Vidal would go into some challenges, Gary Medel would go into some challenges, maybe a little bit aggressively, and then I saw Vidal get knocked down 3 or 4 times in like a 10-minute span, and that felt like you want to flip that switch, then we will flip that switch too, and we can handle that type of game as well.
Well, Chile are not fairly guilty of that kind of behaviour themselves. You'd probably find.
Yes.
You did mention the name Gary Medel, after all.
True. And I mentioned Tata Martino as well, taking over for El Tri. I don't know if there would have been a better way for him to start as a head coach of Mexico with 2 wins, but then he sits Chicharito for the first game against Chile, and then is rewarded with Raul Jimenez looking sharp, scoring a goal. Then he plays Chicharito against Paraguay. Chicharito gets on the score sheet. And so it felt like he kind of got it right, got the players in that he wanted to get in, but sort of also reminded everybody that, hey, we're a very deep team and there are lots of people who want to be in here, so you got to really work for your spot. And as a fan of the United States, I'm slightly nervous of this El Tri under Tata Martino.
Yeah, I think they are definitely a good-looking squad, and I think he's inherited a good squad. And as you say there, like you look at the Paraguay game, and Chucky Lozano and Raul Jimenez didn't even come off the bench, wasn't even didn't even get any garbage time. So very, very encouraging for them. But I will ask you, as a US fan, you say you're very nervous. Mm-hmm. Why?
I think because
what are they going to take away from you?
It really, like, for lack of a better term or phrase, it is kind of bragging rights, which the United States, I would say, probably has not had in a very long time, or at least in the last year or so. But I think because historically CONCACAF has been what CONCACAF is, which is a confederation dominated by a few teams, and in the recent history, it's been the United States and Mexico. So I think, the joke has always been, the Gold Cup. I'm really excited to watch the USA and Mexico play each other in the final. That isn't always the case, but it has been frequently, or at the very least in the semifinals is where they tend to meet, if not the final. Yeah. And so I think with that, it sort of is. It would be the equivalent, I guess, of if this is a very strange one, but if like England we're always kind of at like on top, or maybe not in England, but if it was like only Germany and England were good in UEFA, then you would sort of maybe have this, like, you would care more about what Germany do because they are your main rivals. That's kind of what it is for me, is when I feel like there's this other country who we've kind of historically, well, again, more recently historically, gone back and forth with in who was dominant and who had these moments, and you've got Dos a Cero, and then you have the 2011 Gold Cup final where they kind of switched that one pretty quickly. It feels like, it's back and forth and it's interesting and who's going to get the upper hand this time. And then to see this Mexico team and how good they are, and now they have this competent coach who I 100% believe in, whereas Juan Carlos Osorio it was always sort of like, is this the right gamble, or is him switching to a back one for no apparent reason maybe not the best idea? It just sort of, it looks from top to bottom like a very good team with a lot of talent, managed by a person who knows what he's doing and believes in himself. And it just feels like maybe the United States is going to struggle to get some results against Mexico for the next couple years, or at least couple games.
Well, that's a very reasonable answer to my pretty flippant question, so thank you for that. But let's agree from this game, though, the highlight, or the big talking point should be Tata Martino getting kicked with the ball in the face by the Paraguay coach.
So I want to ask you where you are on that one, because like at first I was just like, oh, it looks like, because I only saw it like a couple times on Twitter, that quick GIF, but it looked to me like it's a long ball, right? And the Paraguay coach Barrizzo, he's trying to, I think, control it and miscontrols it, and it goes into the face of Tata. But then, like, the fourth official steps out and sort of, like, does the, like, okay, everybody stay separate. And I think he thought for a minute, like, it was an intentional shot at Tata Martino. I don't think it was, but, like, what, am I right in saying that it was, like, a miscontrolled moment? Or do you think he was trying to, like, volley it back into play or something?
I think he was trying to volley it back to the line, but I think it was just a terrible attempt at doing so. And it didn't seem, there was no malice in it, and they had a little hug afterwards, so there was nothing wrong with it. But it was one of those ones where it wasn't that hard. It wasn't hit that hard, but because he didn't know it was coming, he wasn't looking. That makes it all the more painful, doesn't it?
It really does. And there's also, I do think there's a moment of, like, I've had that before. Like, I was walking across a field after a game once, and two people were like just warming up and I think hitting long balls, and one like tagged me right in the side of the head. And there's the moment of like, whoa, this is terrifying. That was frightening. And then there's also that moment of like, I was walking with my teammates, so they all kind of saw it, and the other guy's like, oh, sorry. And it's just this weird moment of like, I've been hit in the face. I don't know what to do. I'm vulnerable. And I do think that if you do that in front of a packed stadium, there's also that element of like, now not only have I been hit with a ball, but maybe the pride's a little bit hurt as well. So I think it's definitely a strange moment that I'm happy did not happen to me, or at least didn't happen to me in front of thousands and thousands of people.
So basically you're saying if Tata can survive that, he can do anything.
I mean, yeah, that's about what I'm saying. I would definitely agree with that. I would also agree that we should probably talk about today's sponsor. Even though you didn't suggest it, I'm going to agree with myself and say that we should mention that today's show is sponsored by Roughneck Scarves, the official scarf providers of U.S. Soccer, Major League Soccer, the USL, and the NCAA. We had the Richmond Kickers head coach David Bulow on the show yesterday. It made me very excited for the USL League One to kick off. USL Championship has already begun, but you can get scarves for those teams. They will be the providers there. U.S. Soccer, obviously, you can get any scarf you want that represents the U.S. national team, and then they've got individual player scarves for the U.S. women. But what we wanted to ask, and what we did ask on Twitter, if you were to design a custom roughneck scarf to represent this international window, this international break, what would be on that scarf? It wasn't the best worded question, but I wrote it through one bloodshot eye when I woke up this morning. Ryan, we've got some responses. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, Jasario Machoa wrote in saying, blank on one side and a big question mark on the other. I don't think we've learned enough from this break. Ooh,
yeah.
Almost philosophical.
It is. I'm gonna assume that was go ahead.
I think the problem is with that. I mean, it's a nice reason for having the big question mark, but people are just going to think you're a fan of the Riddler or something.
Yeah, that would be kind of a problem. I mean, I don't know how is the Riddler the primary Batman villain right now? Is that the one that everybody knows?
He's one of them.
Okay, all right. But I think that's probably in reference to the U.S. national team, that maybe we still have lots of questions about who goes where and who fits in. Yeah. And I think that's reflected as well from Commodore Matt Decker. I like the official title of Commodore, who wrote Arturo Vidal running free while McKinney and Pulisic lie hobbled on one side, Tyler Adams everywhere on the other. So I guess I don't know if that's like a Tyler Adams Fantasia situation where you've just got a lot of little Tyler Adamses all over the scarf, or it's just like Tyler Adams stretched out to cover the length of the entire scarf.
Either way, that's a wonderful tableau I'm picturing right now. Next up, we've got
I just want to say, before we move on, I just want to say that may be the first usage of tableau in Total Soccer Show history. So well done, my friend. You get.
I was even going to go tableau or tapestry, and I went tableau, and I think it worked. I think I got away with it.
I think it did.
Totally not J.R. Smith said, Joachim Low holding a door open with Thomas Müller, Jerome Boateng and Mats Hummels walking out on one side, and Löw holding holding a door open with Serge Gnabry, Kai Havertz, and Leroy Sané walking in on the other side. Oh, it's symbolic scarf time. Changing of the guard.
Time. We're going to talk a little bit more about Germany and their win over the Netherlands here in a little bit. I did want to say also, Ryan, that if you had said tapestry, that would not have been the first usage of tapestry ever, because I believe I quoted Indiana Jones when he was doing his Swedish accent from Indiana Jones on The Last Crusade, talking about tapestries. So there you go. Nice. Jeff Huffman says, on one side, it's the international break, sponsored by, on the other side, midfield bubble wrap. Random injuries to your stars during friendlies got you down. Our patented bubble technology massages while protecting quads, glutes, and ankles. Use code TSS for 20% off. Jeff, I appreciate the effort. Wrong code, though. Total Soccer Show for 20% off. Ryan, did I hear that you have a scarf of your own? Did you mention that before we started recording?
Yeah, I've got a scarf idea. So basically, on one side says England, Euro 2020 winners. Other side, you flip it over. It came home, baby.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, we're gonna need a lot of these. I think we're gonna have to ask Roughneck to ramp up production of these for next summer, because we're gonna need a lot of them.
Question though, what I always assumed that it was the World Cup trophy because, you know, the English quote unquote invented soccer. They did. I'll give them that. But I always assumed that meant it was World Cup. Is it just any sort of trophy constitutes it coming home?
It's football that's coming home. It's the very concept of the game.
Okay, so that's what it means. If England win, then they get to take the concept of football back to English shores.
It's been away over 50 years. It's coming back next summer, I can tell.
This feels suddenly vaguely like the plot to an Indiana Jones movie. Now that I've already mentioned it, it does feel like there's some weird artifact somewhere that holds like the history of football, to use, you know, the proper terminology. I like that idea, Ryan. I like that idea a lot. We're going to talk about England in a second, but first, I should reiterate that if our listeners want to get a scarf of their own, not the custom ones, but any of the other scarves that are on offer, they can do so by going to roughneckscarves.com. That's RUFFNECK scarves.com, and you can use the promo code Total Soccer Show, all one word, for 20% off.
Once again, the way they spell rough like a dog would say it.
Yeah.
Rough.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's how you know that they're like, you know, authentic and gritty. They're not spelling out rough the fancy way. No, sir. No,
exactly.
Sir.
No silent GH for them.
Exactly. You beat me to it. Thank you to Roughneck Scarves for sponsoring today's show. All right, Ryan, let's talk England since you brought them up. It's a confusing thing to do because, or it's not confusing, but it's sort of a challenging thing to talk about because England looked so good this international break, and there are so many reasons for optimism, but then the window's sort of marred by what happened in Montenegro. So maybe we should start there and then try to end on a happier note. Does that work for you?
Sure. So obviously we had another racist incident or series of racist incidents in this game from the Montenegro fans. Danny Rose and Raheem Sterling reported to be hearing racist abuse. Gareth Southgate said he heard it too. Montenegro's coach said he did not hear or notice anything, which is worth noticing. But UEFA are certainly looking into it. And they say if there's a charge coming, they're going to make a decision on the 16th of May. 16th of May, it's March. Yep, 16th of May, the racism charge potentially coming in for Montenegro on this one. Obviously, you know, deplorable behavior. We can't have that kind of thing. Probably a reflection of society as a whole. Something we've seen in the domestic game this season as well. I appreciate the way that someone like Raheem Sterling handles it as well. You know, with his goal celebration at the end, he's defiant of it, and there's many ways to handle it, and that's one of them. And good on him for taking it like that. But
can I interject real fast to say one thing I loved about his celebration? So the aspect of the celebration that will be sort of like immortalized, I think, is him cupping his hands to his ears. To the Montenegrin crowd. The part that I really enjoy, if you watch just before he does that when he scores, it's a little bit of a finger wag. As he's running, he's giving the crowd a finger wag, a low-key finger wag. Then he does the ear cup. But just the sort of, like, I've scored a goal, we have destroyed you, and also shame on you, and your taunts don't matter to me. It was just like a 1, 2, 3, 4 punch that I thought was an absolutely beautiful, delicious response to just some really, really horrific and terrible actions on the part of those fans.
Yeah. Raheem Sterling, by the way, if we can focus on him, he's basically my hero now. It's almost like, I don't want to call it a redemption story, but, when he first came on the scene, he was sort of like a cheeky teenager who was giving lip to Brendan Rodgers and then, getting a bad reputation for that interview he did before he moved to Man City and being accused of being a money grabber and whatnot. But the way he's handled the negative media coverage, the way he's handled the reactions he gets, and the way his game has come on, particularly under Pep Guardiola, I'm just so impressed with him as a person and as a player. I think he's real credit to the game and to England as well.
Two things there. One, when I was talking with Daryl about like any games he thought we should definitely try to cover yesterday, he said, "Well, I assume you're going to talk about England." And I said, "Oh, do you mean like because of the racist incident?" And kind of talking that out. And he was like, No, it's because you all seem to find a way to talk about Raheem Sterling every time the two of you are on air. Because it is the case that he just keeps doing such impressive things this season that it's kind of hard not to talk about him.
It's no coincidence that he's been very good in the time that we've been doing this show together. So yeah, certainly. And what more can you say? I mean, one of the best things if we're going to talk about the actual soccer on the field, thinking to next summer, you got Harry Kane up top, Raheem Sterling on the left, and Jadon Sancho on the right. That is tantalising.
I mean, it's a solid squad. And even like Callum Hudson-Odoi, who comes in, an 18-year-old coming in and looks, he had some moments where there was like, oh yeah, he's 18 and has not, started a Premier League game yet, I believe. But still, like just that, to see that like level of youth coming through and looking like, oh yeah, that's going to be another player who's going to be a solid performer for many years to come. It's strange to think of England in that way that I think of, like, say, like the Germany reference in the Roughneck Scarves ad, and the fact that, like, oh, they've got this guy, and that person didn't even play, and there's so much depth of talent coming through, and we think about Brazil the same way. It's strange to think about England kind of getting to that level of just, oh, they've got all these players who are amazing, and then they've got this next generation coming through who look like they're going to be equally amazing. I imagine it's a very exciting time to be an England fan.
I can't wait for them to disappoint us because the expectations are getting high again, aren't they? I mean, the default setting for England fans over the past couple of decades has been, oh, they're only going to disappoint us. They're going to go out in the first round of knockout stage or whatever tournament we get to. The pattern is we blast through these qualifiers like we are right now and then just disappoint when a real big test comes up. And to be fair, we did falter at the World Cup when we got our first big test. But you have to have belief behind these players, and you have to look at that squad and think, yeah, they're really up there, surely.
Yeah, and I think to your point about the expectations increasing, though, I think expectations... Now, obviously, I'm not English, so you would know far better than I, but it has always felt to me like the expectations increase regardless of the quality of the team, that it becomes this sort of like, oh, but if this happens, and Peter Crouch somehow becomes the best striker in the world and becomes unplayable in this tournament, like, we could do it. Like, there's this element of, like, talking yourself into England being very good in a tournament.
Right.
And I think that is sort of where the expectation comes from, because the more you have to talk about it, the more you have to explain it to yourself, the more it becomes like, okay, yeah, I think this is going to happen. And once you think about it that often, that frequently, it becomes like, oh yeah, Peter Crouch is the best striker in the world. He's going to like set the world alight. And then when he doesn't, you're sort of disappointed. Whereas I feel like this squad, with the depth they have, you could sort of look at that and be like, yeah, I mean, if Jadon Sancho doesn't do it, then Callum Hudson-Odoi can come in and do it. Or Ross Barkley can suddenly turn it on and get a brace and an assist and look unplayable. Like, it feels like there's more depth there to sort of back up some of that hype. Whether or not England will end up living up to that hype remains to be seen. I think you've already guaranteed it with your scarf idea. But it is such an exciting time to watch England, which again is why this incident or these incidents were so frustrating, because it's disheartening to know that is still such a pervasive thing that people out there would think like, yeah, the proper response to a team I don't like is to make monkey chants is insane to me that is still a thing that we have to talk about in this era. But it's also like, I don't want to like move away from that so quickly, but I do just want to say that it's also like, It frustrated me a little bit because it becomes the thing that people focus on, and how it was sort of like, oh, it's so unfair to these players and I can't believe they have to experience this. And that is all very true. But it's also the case that those players dealt with it. Like, they responded to it in a very hostile environment to go 1-0 down. And it would have been easy to sort of shut down and think like, oh, there's this racist abuse and I'm just not dealing with this. I'm not like going to have it. And to respond the way they did, and for Callum Hudson-Odoi to like almost get the goal. I know Ross Barkley turns it in, and Danny Rose looked very good, and Raheem Sterling gets his goal. And Kyle Walker looked excellent. Dele Alli did as well, and it just felt like those players kind of rising to the occasion and turning that game around and ending up with a 5-1 win it's just incredibly impressive to me. And I just thought it was like that is the story that I think I would like to remember that game from, is those players finding a way to win and then also shaming the crowd in the process.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll qualify what I said earlier when I said I was pleased with Raheem Sterling's reaction. There's no right or wrong reaction, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
That. But but I was just pleased with how the team reacted and how he, he not brushed it off, but he got the job done, so to speak. But I would like to talk about the potential punishments for Montenegro. So I'll read you what UEFA say. The minimum punishment from UEFA for an incident of racism is a partial stadium closure, while a second offence results in one match being played behind closed doors and a fine of €50,000. Any subsequent offence is punished with more than one match behind closed doors, a stadium closure, the forfeiting of a match, the deduction of points, and or disqualification from the competition. Now, where I stand on this is strongest punishment possible, send the biggest message, punish the team as well as the fans, because that's the only way the fans are going to get it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So what do you mean by that then? Is that a kick them out of the competition sort of punishment? Is that a close doors for the rest of qualifying? What do you think is the step?
I'd say definitely close doors for at least a few games and deduct points I think maybe disqualification for the competition might be a bit too far, but deduct points, it makes it, pretty meaningless for them to get through.
Yeah, I think that's a solid approach too. I hadn't thought about point deduction because it is the case that you'll see when fans throw stuff onto the field, the players, the home team players will kind of go over there on occasion when that happens and say hey, stop, and we'll try to kind of put an end to it as quickly as they can. You did not see that in this game, and I know the coach and their PR person said, we didn't hear anything like that, but I mean, I will say I did not hear any of the chants. I didn't hear them picked up on mic. I know the BBC commentator, I think, said he heard them as early as the 6th minute. But what I did hear is aggressive whistling when the black English players had the ball. And to me, right there, that is what's happening, Montenegro players. And you easily could have been just, turning around and holding one finger up to the lips to say stop it. That would have been a big step. And that did not happen. So I'm with you that the players deserve some punishment as well for what happened here, as does the federation and the fans. The thing that I find so kind of frustrating, and my wife is in law school, is going to be a lawyer, but this to me is why people dislike lawyers. It's not the, ambulance chaser thing, or at least in my opinion, it's not. It's the, we made these rules and we have to live by them, that UEFA are sort of going to go back to this, we have this step-by-step list for how we deal with these types of incidents. And then it sort of becomes and we're bound to it. So while we would like to do more, the first step is only a partial stadium ban. That's what we have to do. We have to live by it. And it's sort of but you made these rules. You guys put these in place. And now you're being we're kind of our hands are tied. We have to do what the rules say, the rules that they themselves put into place. And it just feels like a very easy way to not have to really self-police.
Yeah, no nuance exercised.
Not so much. So I again, it's a thing that it's going to keep happening, and it's worth noting. I think Ian Wright talked about this. I forget who else came. John Barnes came out and talked about it as well. That it's still, they were both quick to point out, it still happens in England. It happens this season to Raheem Sterling. So it's not just that it's some problem in the Baltics. It's a pervasive issue that definitely needs more aggressive policing. And I hope that, I honestly, the sad thing is, I would like to say, I hope this is the thing that, is the catalyst for change. I don't think it will be, but I do hope that the more coverage it gets and the more impact it has. Not that I was planning to, go take a vacation in Montenegro, but I do think that if I were in that area, I'd be no, I don't need to go to Montenegro. That's not a thing.
I'll stay with Serbia, thank you very much.
Yeah,
or maybe not actually.
Maybe Croatia. I don't know. Is Croatia better? I don't even know. I don't know. But I will say that I hope that just the more attention and the brighter the light is that's shown upon these moments, the more change at least comes from the outside, if not from UEFA itself. But we've talked about how good England looked and how they were able to respond. We haven't really talked about any of the individual goals. Was there one that you enjoyed more than any of the others?
I liked the Hudson-Odoi finish, which was actually given to Ross Barkley, which Ross Barkley did not deserve that as a goal, I don't think.
Actually, I'm interested to hear that because I did think one of the angles made it look like that ball was going wide, and he did turn it on frame. What did you think? Did you think it was going in the whole way?
Well, maybe the cameras were playing tricks in this particular game because the 4-1, the fourth goal, where Harry Kane looked about 5 miles offside.
Right? Okay, I thought I was taking crazy pills because nobody protested that.
At first, I was thinking, is it because the ball came past from his own half?
Yeah.
And it wasn't that. It was, there was an angle that showed that he was kind of in line with Sterling when the ball was passed to him. And even when Kane put it in the net, he was just like, oh, whatever, because he thought that's going to get flagged. And he looked up and, hang on, that wasn't flagged. Yeah, he pumped his fist. It took him a few minutes to register that he got a goal there.
I'm glad you brought that one up because I was so I watched that and no one protested, and I thought maybe it's because it's the fourth goal and they've just kind of given up at this point. But it definitely looked offside to me. I think Ross Barkley's second was my favorite, and not because it was of like a particularly great finish, or not because I love Ross Barkley. It's because that goal, like even more so than Raheem Sterling's actual goal, is the one where I was just like, Raheem Sterling is legitimately unplayable. Like he just keeps the ball, even when it gets poked away, even when he's challenged or gets a physical challenge, he just keeps going. He does not stop and somehow finds a way through, somehow manages to hold onto the ball, and then somehow manages to find Ross Barkley. I just thought like the effort and endeavor from Raheem Sterling on that goal and throughout this game were incredibly impressive.
Yeah, he was very impressive throughout, and Barkley got a nice tap in because of him.
Yeah, okay. Ross Barkley definitely benefited a little bit. Ross Barkley did play a great ball through for Raheem Sterling to then square for Harry Kane. So at least there's that. He had a little bit of a skillful moment on his own. But speaking of Harry Kane, one thing that you brought to my attention, which I thought was totally a joke / made up, but it sounds like maybe there's a grain of truth to, is that Harry Kane has aspirations to become a two-sport athlete.
Yeah, now we get into the real business of Total Soccer Show. Of course. Harry Kane has announced his intention in 10 to 12 years, he gave the time frame, to become an NFL kicker. Apparently he's big buddies with Tom Brady. His dogs are named after Tom Brady and Russell Wilson, which made me think, who calls their dog Russell?
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Is it Russell or do you think it's Wilson? Similarly, is it Tom or is it Brady?
I think it's both names. I think he's in the park with his leash going, here Tom Brady, here Tom Brady.
That would
Russell Wilson, come back.
That would be so upsetting and hilarious all at once. I feel like there are many dogs in the New England area that are named Tom or Brady, as well as many children also named Tom and Brady.
Brady, I think I totally see that as a dog's name. Russell, not so much. Anyway, we're getting bogged down in this detail. I think we should focus here on the fact that Harry Kane wants to become a kicker, and it got me thinking. I mean, we know that Tony Meola tried to do it back in the day, didn't he, with the Jets? And it made me remember a video of Sergio Ramos. I actually looked it up. It was 2012 on whatever the International Champions Cup was called at that point, with Real Madrid were playing Celtic in Philly. And at halftime, he did a 53-yard field goal on his first attempt, and he said it was the first time he'd ever tried it, which made me think, if Sergio Ramos can bust out a 53-yard field goal the first time, I think Harry Kane could probably do it as well.
All right, so here's where I'm gonna jump in to say that. So I was a place kicker in college, and I saw a photo of Harry Kane in pads. I don't know if it was photoshopped or if it was like a PR stunt or if he actually wore pads and tried to kick, but that is a big difference. Like if you're just wearing shorts and kicking, it's way easier to be a kicker. But when you're wearing constricted, like the kind of constricted football pants with pads in there too, even though kickers wear lighter pads, it is a difficult thing, or it's definitely a different animal on top of the fact that
Tottenham shirts are pretty tight though, you gotta remember.
I mean, that is definitely true. I don't know what to make of the tight jerseys. That's not a trend. I feel like that. I often think about like how fashion in the moment, we're like, oh, there's no way anything can ever beat this fashion. This is going to be in style forever. And then 10 years from now, we look back and we think, do we really think zippers were going to replace buttons as things to wear on shirts? And similarly, I don't think the tight jersey trend is going to be kind to us down the road.
Definitely not.
I do think that like that uniform factors into it. And then also, it's kind of easy to hit a field goal without 11 400-pound men trying to crush you. I do wonder what the situation will be like if there's a little bit more pressure. That said, Harry Kane has scored plenty of big goals in front of lots of people, so maybe he will do it. I would like to see it. I'd be curious, though. I think he'd be 37 or 39 based on the time frame he gave, which is not usually when people get into kicking as professionals. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I hope he does stick with it. It sounds like he plans to. I don't know what to make of it, but I'm excited to see Harry Kane probably playing for the New England Patriots with Tom Brady probably still playing there somehow.
He's just going to be on Match of the Day doing commentary. That's all he's going to be doing, let's be honest.
Can Harry Kane do commentary? I've heard Harry Kane talk.
You make a good point. He'll be on Match of the Day silently nodding while Alan Shearer still does the commentary.
There we go. That makes more sense to me. All right. Where else would you like to go? We've talked Concacaf. We've talked England. Should we stay in Europe? Do you want to go to South America? What works best for you, Mr. Bailey?
How about we have a look at what the Germans and the Dutch are doing? Should we do that?
All right, let's do it. So again, this was alluded to earlier with the Roughneck Scarves advertisement, but especially for Germany against the Netherlands, really changing it up. Not a formation that I really expected to see from Germany. It was, I'm going to say, a 3-4-1-2 with Leon Goretzka as the number 10, Leroy Sané and Serge Gnabry as your forwards. Theoretically, but I almost, like, we talked about false nines on yesterday's show. I don't think I've ever seen a team have two false nines. That was an interesting approach. What did you make of Germany's new formation?
It worked, didn't it? I thought
it really did.
I mean, you might argue that the back three didn't work. They looked occasionally a bit disorganized, and they did let in some goals, of course. But I mean, I think a criticism of Germany, certainly at the World Cup and maybe in recent months, has been, having that isolated man up top doesn't really work, and they've at times struggled to have a big natural striker up there. And I've got a theory that Germany are always better without Timo Werner. I don't rate him.
You won't get an argument from me. I think that's a player who, admittedly, it's not as though I'm watching him week in and week out, but I have been pretty unimpressed by what I saw from him both in the World Cup and at club level. And I think that extends to, maybe this is harsh because I can't remember if there was more to it when it comes to a medical injury or medical situation, but there was the one where he asked to be subbed out because the crowd was too loud in Turkey. And there's just moments like that where I'm sort of like, is that who you want leading the line? Is that the person you want in that clutch moment? Timo Werner has never struck me as that person. So I think I'm with you, and I'm especially with you given how good Leroy Sané and Serge Gnabry looked playing off of each other. Yeah,
I mean, having the two wide players as the top two, it worked really well. And Sané had an incredible game, certainly vindicated his position, getting back into this team after the World Cup being left out, of course. And just, I think Pep Guardiola look at that game and think, he's added another string to his bow there, because he looked like a central striker a lot of the time, and just the kind of runs he was making. Very impressive. And Serge Gnabry as well. I mean, he's obviously auditioning for that Arjen Robben role and doing very well with that at Bayern. And I think he's also given an extra dynamic to his game there with this performance.
I completely forgot about the Arjen Robben audition, because that is basically what he does for that goal, isn't it? It gets the ball out wide, cuts inside, gets around Virgil van Dijk, gets that shot off, puts it top corner. That is pretty Robben-esque. I think of his more so as low blasts to the bottom corner, but even so, I think it doesn't really matter because it's still very similar. We got a few tweets about this from people saying oh my gosh, I can't believe Gnabry roasted Virgil van Dijk. I can't believe he beat Virgil van Dijk so badly. I watched this again. It's kind of really impressive to watch it a couple times just to see he doesn't really beat Virgil van Dijk. He gets a little tiny bit of a gap and is able to fire that shot off. I think the thing that really beats Virgil van Dijk, or maybe causes problems, is that Dumfries, the right back, goes sprinting back to try to help out and essentially just kind of runs between Gnabry and Virgil van Dijk and doesn't actually help defend at all. And I think, if anything, kind of confuses the proceedings, especially from a defensive side, and allows Gnabry to get that shot. But either way, it's an amazing finish to the top corner. And I also just enjoy the German, intense celebration for a half second and then muted sort of team huddle of this is about what we expect, even though we haven't won here in a very long time. I think could have been going back to Cruyff. I think it went back to the 90s was the last time.
It was
they
20-something years.
23 years. There you go. Yeah. Which is in the 90s. There we go. Haha, correct. Math. I really enjoyed that front two, just to continue to gush about them for a moment, because I thought what they did cause problems for the Netherlands because of their mobility. And the commentators latched onto this one pretty early, that because they were moving around as much as they were and sometimes dropping into midfield and sometimes going wide. I mean, you look at that Dutch defense for a minute, and it's Virgil van Dijk, it's Matthias de Ligt, and then even Frankie de Jong, who's going to be at Barcelona, ahead of them, dropping in at times. And really, you would think like, oh, that's going to be tough to get through. And it's especially would have been tough to get through, as you said, with one striker and just sort of trying to link up through the middle. But because of the mobility of Gnabry and Sané, there were times when I saw Sané go maybe 15 yards into his own half, and Virgil van Dijk followed him the whole way. Because I think the center backs just started to think like, I don't know what else to do here. I know I'm supposed to be marking somebody. I need to track him. I think maybe they started to get more instructions to stay closer to those two. But then that opens up space. And it was just really interesting to watch a Germany team that looked so bad this summer and has had a kind of disastrous run, and to see them suddenly look very electrifying. It felt like, oh, now I see why they stuck with Jogi Löw, because he's found another wrinkle. He's found another, what did you say, arrow for his
quiver, for his bow.
Thank you. I forget where they're held. It was quiver. Good call. Well done.
Yeah, and I think definitely Thomas Müller, known as the Raumdeuter, the person who finds the space. But Germany found loads of space in this Holland side as well, I thought, and that was due part in the way today was set up. And I wasn't terribly impressed with Frankie de Jong in this one. I think there was a few instances where sort of Kroos and Kimmich, both in separate instances, ran straight through the midfield with not much stopping them. I mean, as good as Germans were, I think that the Dutch were quite disorganised. But I say that this all contributed to it being a very entertaining game, in that both defences weren't quite at the races. And one thing I will say, Ryan Babel, he had a few really thunderous shots that Manuel Neuer got behind. And he thought how Ryan Babel nearly ruined Liverpool in that Fulham game, was it a couple of weeks ago? He could have, in a couple of weeks, ruined Liverpool and ruined Germany. Ryan Babel, with his crazy red hair.
I think we all saw it coming at the beginning of this season, that he would be the focal point. But I think the other thing that stood out to me, because I would agree with you about the Dutch not looking as good and looking disorganized at times. Even though they was 2-2 up until the very end of the game, both of their goals a little bit scrappy. Memphis Depay kind of latches onto one. It's a good layoff from Gigi Wijnaldum, and he's able to finish. But this is after a little bit of chaos in the box, and then their first goal comes from like a short corner that's kind of blocked and then played back in, and it was a little bit chaotic. And I say that just to say that the Dutch did look like they had a lot of designed set pieces and a lot of structure when it came to those set pieces. And that stood in juxtaposition to me to how chaotic they looked at times. And I do think that maybe that's a little bit of them figuring things out, but I also think it's them being kind of pulled apart by a lot of the fluidity of Germany and by players being involved in the attack that I don't think the Dutch saw coming. I mean, you had Ginter stepping out from the center back role and being an active part of the attack on occasion, and then you had Nico Schultz not just getting the winner but getting the assist for the opener, bombing down that left hand side and finding space, and then for the winner, it's a really good finish. And it's sort of similar to what I was talking about now with England and Brazil, that it's just like, oh, they've just found another left back who can suddenly be an attacking threat but also defend really well. Of course they have. Germany are entirely too good at soccer.
Yeah,
that's my takeaway. It is.
Life's just unfair. And I'm not 100% convinced I'm drinking the Kool-Aid of the Netherlands being really good again. I mean, I watched a few of their UEFA Nations League games, and they have been impressive, and they had beat these lot 3-0 in the UEFA Nations League, so you can't take that away from them. But when it comes to the Euros, I still see them as a pretty rank outsider.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I think they'll probably make it, so that's a step up from what they did last summer. But then we'll see what happens from there. But I have to say, Germany fans probably feeling a little bit better. And since we've been talking about teams that are absolutely stacked with talent, all of a sudden let's move to Brazil, shall we? They defeated the Czech Republic 3-1, and the David Neres was the one that I saw, and I'm sure I'm butchering that. I'm sure it's like David Neres or something. My Portuguese is not very good. But he subs on for his debut, gets 2 assists, almost scores, and he rightfully gets a lot of the headlines and has been a focal point. But going back and watching this game again, watching the extended highlights of this game, I was just reminded of how many good players there are for Brazil, which is obviously a silly thing to say, but just players that we kind of forget are even that good. Like, for example, I think for the third goal, it's Danilo stepping in. Like, Danilo, like I always forget about him being at Man City and being very, very capable. But here he is. He steps in. He wins the ball. It's the second goal, excuse me. It's Gabriel Jesus' first. Like, he wins the ball playing as a right back with an aggressive step. Then he charges through the middle. It's a good 30-yard dribble. Then he plays the ball in and splits two defenders for David Neres, who then squares it to Gabriel Jesus. But just that sort of a moment was a reminder of oh yeah, even this guy who I don't necessarily always think of as being this top tier player can step up for Brazil and look just like he is. It was a reminder of how kind of potent that Brazil squad can be.
Yeah, and that goal in particular reminded me of the quality that Brazil have. In that Neres could have had a shot there. Most strikers probably would have had a shot, but he did that unselfish pass to Gabriel, sort of that that you'd expect to see on the futsal court, those short passes and passing it into the net, which I thought was fantastic. And Neres, I'm saying Neres.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's right.
That's probably correct. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's.
But he got the call benefiting from Vinicius Junior not being there, obviously. But it looks like he's definitely a talent to watch out for. And something I did notice, I don't know if you've seen it. It's on YouTube. He had to do his initiation song when he joined the squad.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I have not seen it. I forgot, what song did he do?
It's called something like Insecurity, which is, I don't know if there's a level of irony pasted into that somehow, or maybe he's revealing himself a bit too much. But he definitely had loads of flair, and he got that was kind of back heel assist, wasn't it? Was it for the third for the Gabriel Jesus goal?
It was he back heels it to Alan, who then turns and kind of back heels it to Gabriel Jesus. It was the assist for the assist, but it was very skillful and technical, and it's a lovely back heel. But to your point about it belonging on a futsal court, do you remember the Brazil ad from? I mean, I feel like it was only a couple years ago, but it was probably more than a decade at this point. But it's the one of them getting ready in the locker room where they're sort of it's Dino, Ronaldinho's in there. I think original Ronaldo is in there too, and they're kind of like flicking the shoe back and forth, and they're just sort of doing Brazil things while they get ready for the game. Yeah. And then I think what they've done is put that as though they're getting ready for I think it was Chile, who they just kind of passed their way through for this beautiful goal, and it's sort of they just do it all the time. And that's what these goals reminded me of, especially the one that you're just talking about, that third goal. It was just ole, 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 and then a goal. It was just these moments of beautiful flair. If you haven't seen the goals from this game, you should definitely check them out, because they're not even beautiful goals by any stretch, but they're just so well worked, and the vision and the passing is so excellent. But then you also have the first goal from Roberto Firmino, where he basically just blazes through, the Czech defender kind of panics and doesn't make a very smart play on the ball, and then he ends up scoring. Firmino does, and it's you can have that sort of option of the just kind of, not that Firmino's a blunt instrument, but that's a sort of blunt instrument goal, and then you can have the Samba goal as well, all in one game. It's the joy of watching Brazil. It's why I do enjoy the international break, because you get to see teams like this. There we go.
I'm glad I saw this one rather than the draw with Panama they had in their previous friendly.
Yeah, but we don't need to talk about that.
We do need to step back here and remember, Brazil did win this game 3-1, but you have to bear in mind a few days earlier, England beat this same team 5-0, ergo hence, therefore, England better than Brazil.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair, and we should make that a scarf, and you should make that a guarantee at the next World Cup, that England will do better than Brazil.
I'm going to hit up Roughneck right now and get my order in for that one.
Beautiful. Well, while you do that, I'll move to the final talking point that I have in my notes, at least. I did want to mention that African Cup of Nations qualifying is complete. The tournament is set. The participants are now known. It will be taking place this summer, June 21st. I can hear you typing. I'm assuming you're actually emailing Roughneck. June 21st to July 19th of this summer will be in Egypt. The two things I wanted to note here, because I honestly didn't know. I have not been paying attention to African Cup of Nations qualifying.
Yeah.
And usually with tournaments like this, when you have those continental competitions, there's always a couple teams that don't end up making it. You have that with the Euros. You don't necessarily have that with the Gold Cup. You obviously don't have it with Copa America, because they have to add teams to make that competition happen. But with African Cup of Nations, you usually do. Not so this time. They've expanded the competition to 24 teams instead of 16. So really, the only kind of big names that are missing out would be Emmanuel Adebayor. His Togo did not qualify.
Togo was the one I could see, yeah.
And Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, I think Gabon will not be there either. But aside from that, it's kind of all the historically good teams, and then some of the up and coming teams. So you've got everybody involved there, that will be this summer. The thing that I was really confused by is I didn't even know who was hosting it. So then I looked that up, and it's Egypt hosting. But then I looked at the qualification tables, and Egypt had to qualify, which sort of confused me because why would the host nation qualify? I did some digging. I know the answer. Ryan Bailey, do you have a guess?
Is it because Cameroon were the original hosts?
You have the answer. There you go. You got it, my friend. Yes, for a variety of reasons, like relating to infrastructure, and then also Boko Haram, and also the possibility of civil war. The competition was taken away from Cameroon. So I think it was after 2 games of qualifying, it was given to Egypt. And I think they just kind of let them continue in qualifying. And even if they hadn't made it, I think maybe they would have ended up going anyway. But they were pretty safely assured of qualification at this point. So Egypt will be there, as will many, many other teams in the competition. Ryan, I know you've done some researching of your own about this summer's African Cup of Nations. What have you found out?
Well, the one curious thing is they've moved it from, usually it's in the winter, isn't it, January, February, when the temperatures on the African continent are traditionally a little cooler. It's now going to be June and July. And I had a look at the temperatures in Egypt, the average temperature in Cairo in July, 82 degrees. Now, that's not too bad when you consider it as an arid, dry heat. It's not going to be too humid. But I looked into that as well. There are 4 venues, 2 of which are coastal. Alexandria and the Suez, and when you're in coastal areas of Egypt, it is very, very humid. So it'll be in the 80s and humid in 2 of the 4 venues. So maybe not ideal planning. They're giving it a shot this time because I imagine they get a lot of pushback from the European leagues and the disruption that this tournament can cause to the teams who have the money. So we'll see how it goes. Might be some heat breaks and such involved in this one.
I think that's probably true. I will also say from experience, because prior to living in the Middle East, I didn't really believe the whole, or I didn't fully understand what the whole, it's a dry heat. I thought that was just something you say. That's a thing. It is a thing. Because I think it was one day we were in Kurdistan in northern Iraq, and I think it was 118 degrees outside. But then really when you went in the shade, it was fine. You weren't really that hot anymore because you were out of the sun. And I remember then we went back, my wife and I then were, then fiance, were flying back to the United States via Turkey, where we had lived previously. And we arrived in Istanbul. We had scheduled a 24-hour layover. And we get off the plane. We go to where we had lived, to our old bar and everything. And it was 85 degrees. And I was like, this is ridiculous. It's so light and breezy. It's 30 degrees cooler. But because, as you said, there's water around, it is so humid, I had to go buy new clothing because I sweat so much in that situation. So dry climate is way easier to handle than the humidity. I think you're absolutely right. That is probably going to be more of an issue than they might have thought.
It's why Vegas summer is better than Florida summer.
I'm not sure either one of those is a summer I want to participate in, but I'll take your point.
If it's an either or.
If it's an either or, okay, I'll go Vegas. That works. That works for me. Ryan, anything else you wanted to get to from this international break?
I think I'm all set. I think we've done a pretty good job here, if I don't say so myself.
I would agree with you, my friend. So I will then say goodbye to you. I know that we're not going to be talking anytime soon. Just kidding. I'll talk to you Monday, right?
Sure, let's do it.
I like that you say that as though, wait, had we previously agreed on that? I feel like we had. Maybe we had. Hey, Ryan, you want to do the show Monday? All right, cool. All right, then I will talk to you then. But until then, we're going to be doing our more standard weekend review, taking a look at some of the bigger games that happened this weekend. But for now, Ryan, thank you very much for taking all the time and for doing all the research, watching all the games, doing the ad read, coming up with your own Roughneck scarf, emailing Roughneck scarves. An impressive performance from top to bottom.
My pleasure as always. I'm off to do some more Egyptian climate research.